Hello, my name is Jim Malek, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to my video today. Um, I hope you're going to learn something about dog bite law in Ohio and the forms and ways to get compensated if you've been harmed by a dog in Ohio. Just by way of background, I worked at Big Bear grocery stores here in Columbus, Ohio for 11 years. Uh, During that time, I went to undergrad at The Ohio State University, where I was a zoology major, and part of my studies at The Ohio State University were in animal behavior. Uh, Upon graduation, I went to law school at Cleveland State University, where I got my Juris Doctorate degree. Been practicing law since 1995, and the firm I work at handles a lot of different type of cases, including dog bite cases. We represent people that have been harmed, and dog bite and dog jumping on and knocking down people are one of the types of harms we see, unfortunately, quite frequently. We in addition to representing individuals, also take referrals from lawyers and co-counsel on those cases. So please give us a call if you have any questions. And this time, I guess I'd just like to tell you a little bit about dog bite law. So if you are bit or harmed by a dog, you can get compensated under the law. Just briefly, I guess I'd like to show a video that a lot of times when we represent people, we subpoena a lot of different information. Included in that information is dash cam video and video from animal control, 911 tapes. There's a whole host of things, veterinarian records. But one of the things in one of these cases was a video, and in the video, just by way of background, you see a brown pit bull and another pit bull. Both of these dogs, or the brown pit bull had, right before this video was taken, had seriously injured an older male. So let me go ahead and play this so that you can see.
633, where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like as long as they don't get all super upset, they might stay in there for a little bit.
You know where you're at.
They know the drill.
Yeah, yeah.
I see around his neck, he just kept like sticking his stuck in his head, and I couldn't get him to work.
Right.
She got into the backyard.
Well, she's getting into the backyard.
About to.
Nice stuff.
To say, if she's in the backyard, we might be able to get him. If she gets him right back up,
As you can see, the fence is roughly about 6 feet tall.
We're 71 on West 36. I'll just hang out for a minute. 545 aired it. It's a black Chrysler. It was all blacked out. Road raging at an excess of 80 miles per hour. 683 has to stop at that location.
I show this video because I think it's important to understand the unpredictable nature of dogs. Dogs oftentimes do things that we expect, and dogs sometimes do things we don't expect. Another thing, we oftentimes put human characteristics and qualities on dogs. Remember, dogs are pack animals by nature, and they exhibit a lot of behaviors toward survival in a wild setting. I know we've domesticated dogs, but they still retain a lot of those instincts that allowed them to survive for many, many years. So let me, I guess, initially kind of just talk about the dog bite, or first of all, how we get laws, how we get rules that people are required to follow. And when they do not follow these rules, how are the consequences determined? So by way of background, and I'll we've got essentially different sources of rules that govern how we, as members of our community, are required to behave. One set of rules that we hear a lot about is the legislative process, and the legislature eventually introduces a bill, gets introduced, modifications take place, committees. Eventually, a bill is basically proposed and given to the governor, who then can sign or veto that bill. One of the bills that, well, I guess one of the pieces of legislation that pertains to dog, there's a specific law that was written by the legislature to hold the owner of the dog, the people that take care of the dog, and people that own or control the property where the dog resides, who allow that dog to live there, liable for all the risks. In other words, all the harms and losses that the dog may cause. And the statute's written in a way that it basically is a risk-shifting statute. It basically says who should be responsible when an animal hurts somebody, a dog, in Ohio. Should it be the taxpayers who pay into a lot of the different compensatory systems such as Medicaid or Medicare? We'll get into crime victims in a little bit, but should it be the taxpayers that should be responsible for harms and losses caused by a dog? Or should it be the owners, the people that take care of the dog, and what we call the harborers, or the people that control the property and allow the dog to be there? And the legislature said we're gonna hold those individuals responsible if a dog bites or harms somebody. And harm doesn't necessarily mean just a dog bite. If a dog runs, if you're riding your bike down the street and a dog runs out in front of you and knocks you over, that's harm. If a dog runs out and jumps up on you, the dog certainly isn't have any vicious nature when it jumps up on somebody, and who's going to be responsible if somebody falls and gets hurt? And that's what we got, the Ohio dog bite statute. I will pull that over here so you can see the actual statute, and it's 955.28b. And this is a Ohio Revised Code statute, and this basically is a legislative set of rules that people are required to follow. And if you own a dog, you take care of a dog. In other words, you're the keeper. Like a zookeeper takes care of animals in the zoo. Or if you're a harborer, and that's somebody that controls the property where the dog resides and allows the dog to be there, or controls the property where the dog is and allows the dog to be there, those individuals are strictly liable for any harm caused by the dog, and this statute says that. So any harm, and when I say any harm, I mean both economic and non-economic harms. So harms such as your medical bills, harms such as wages that you lose because you're healing from an injury, and harms which are much, much greater than either of those two, which we call the non-economic harms. And if you're a young child and you've been scarred as a result of a dog bite to your face, you have to live with that scar for the rest of your life. And there are certain aspects of having a scar in society that sometimes make it difficult for a person. So all those harms and losses, any of those harms and losses, the person that owns, takes care of, and allows the dog to be on a property are all responsible for those harms and those losses. So that's one source of law. That is what we call Ohio's dog bite statute. There's another way an owner can be responsible or liable, I should say, under the law, and that's what we call common law. And common law is the law that's created by our judicial system. So you'll have a dispute, and the dispute will be heard by either a judge or a jury. And once that dispute is decided by a judge or a jury, if either side believes that the judge or the jury, in other words, the verdict was because the judge kind of serves as like a referee, in my view, of these disputes, and if the referee got it so far off, was wrong to such a degree, an appellate court can take it up and say, hey, you didn't follow the law, judge, or you didn't follow the law, jury. And there's a number of different things that can take place. But when they do that, they write an opinion, and that opinion oftentimes contains their holding, and that may have widespread ramifications. So in Ohio, one of the sources of how we are supposed to act in a community is what I call the law of negligence. A person who is that lives in the community has to act as a reasonably prudent person would act. That's a duty that the law imposes upon us. This common law imposes upon us. So if I have a dog that is previously shown vicious signs, has growled at children, and I've had golden retrievers. I've had dogs all my life, and currently I've got a Rottweiler and a rescue dog. But I've had a lot of different dogs over the years, and I had a golden retriever and when I was younger. And one of the things that this golden retriever liked to do, to basically try to become part of a pack, was to jump up on people. And so if your dog jumps up on somebody and it knocks them over and causes harm, well, you're liable under the dog bite statute. If you know your dog has a tendency to jump up on people, then the law of negligence says a reasonably prudent person would not allow the dog to run loose or in a manner that would potentially have the dog jumping up on people. So you have an elderly couple walking down your road, you let your dog out, and you know your dog has a tendency to jump up on people, jumps up on one of the elderly people, knocks them down, breaks a hip. You've got some major harms that have been caused by your dog. And it was foreseeable that your dog would jump up on somebody if you let him out. And under the law, that is negligence. And the harm, based on my negligence, was that somebody got knocked over and hurt. And I'm responsible for that harm under the common law negligence. And so negligence is, there's a set of rules that were required that we think are important, that the judges think are important for us to live by. Being a reasonably person is one of those rules, and if you breach that rule to be a reasonably prudent person and you're not reasonably prudent person, and as a result somebody gets harmed, well, you're responsible for the harms and losses. That's the law of negligence. So you know, one of the things in dog bite cases, I look at both the statute and I look at the common law, and I say, you know, look at all the facts. We get all the information from the veterinarian. We get it from the animal control. We talk to witnesses, sometimes neighbors, and we find out when somebody's been harmed. Number one, who are the owners, the keepers, and the harbors of that dog? And then number two, did this dog have any foreseeable propensity to do what was done? And if so, is there negligence there? Finally, if a dog has previously bit somebody, and you as the owner, keeper of the harbor, if you know that your dog has previously bit somebody, and my dog bites another person in the same fashion, same way, you can also be responsible for punitive damages. These are deterrent damages that are designed to deter this from happening again. So there's different kinds of ways under the law to get compensated for your harms and losses, and I mean all your harms and losses, which the most important harm and loss is the human harm and loss. How whatever injury you have affects your quality of life and affects you both emotionally and physically. That can be really large. You know, if I been a runner all my life, and I'm running down the road and a dog runs out in front of me and trips me and breaks my hip, and I'm no longer able to do what gave me passion in life, you can see that could be a very large harm and a loss. And by law, the judge or the jury, when we get to that point, has to weigh those harms and losses and provide the equal trade dollar value for those harms and those losses. So what are some of the ways? We know, just briefly, some of the ways in which a person can be responsible for the harms and losses that are caused by a dog. What are some of the ways that you can get that compensation? Because that's just the first part of the first step in analyzing a case and handling a case. So one of the ways that I like to look at is all the various ways in which you might be able to get your harms and losses taken care of. And the first thing I always tell folks is we always at least look at the Ohio Crime Victims Fund. If a dog is off the owner's property, the owner's failed to control that dog, and the dog causes harm or losses, as long as you qualify for crime victims compensation, and that means no felony record, recent felony record, then you can qualify to get compensated for your economic harms and your economic losses, and that includes lost time, lost wages, and certainly could include things even such as plastic surgery or cosmetic surgery that might not be covered under a conventional policy, health insurance policy. So crime victims is kind of a fund of last resort. It requires that we exhaust all other avenues before it will kick in, but it does pay up to $50,000. And the nice thing about this is even if you had an old claim, if you'd never filed a crime victim claim for that old claim, we can still likely do that. There's recognition that sometimes the harms and the losses of a criminal activity don't materialize for years. If I was scarred when I was young and I now need some plastic surgery, this fund, we can file a claim, and again, if you meet all the requirements, we can get you compensated. The other nice thing about Ohio Crime Victims is that the attorney's fees are actually paid by the fund, so you don't have to enter into a contingency fee agreement with us to handle a crime victim's case. The fund will actually compensate us for our time. Most often in these types of cases, when I represent somebody, I represent them on a contingency fee basis, and that means that we get a percentage of whatever we recover for our clients. And again, we do take referrals from other attorneys, so we handle a lot of cases in that way also. So we basically work on a contingency fee, and we get a percentage of what we recover, almost always a third of what we recover. And that's how we operate. If we don't recover anything, obviously, then our client would not owe us any attorney fee for that case. So Crime Victims Fund, is one way to get compensated. The next way is if there is a criminal charge brought against the owner of the dog that harmed you. We can go down to criminal court and they can order restitution up to I think it's $5,000 now as part of the criminal sentence, and they can sometimes hang over the person's head, the possibility for additional jail time if they don't pay the restitution. So that's another form of getting some compensation, although I usually don't. Most of the harms are so much greater than the amount of money they'd award down a criminal court that we oftentimes don't even go down that road. One other way that you can get compensated is if the person that owns or maintains or controls the property where the dog bite occurred, if they happen to have homeowners coverage or commercial coverage or renters coverage, a lot of times that coverage also has what's called medical payments coverage, and it's a part of a lot of policies. It's pretty common part of policies, and what it does is it provides up to oftentimes $5,000 towards any medical bills that are incurred as a result of a harm or a loss. So it is a very good way to get compensated up to a specific amount of money, and it doesn't matter who's responsible. If you're harmed on a property, a lot of times that coverage is available. We oftentimes will obtain that coverage early on in a case that we're representing somebody on to give them some initial compensation to allow them to get to their doctor's appointments, to pay their co-pays if they have co-pays, to basically just get the treatment they need initially, and to offset even lost wages. It's basically a way to it's provided for medical bills, and it's an amount of money that we can get typically early on in a case, just to kind of help offset some of those initial costs that a person has. So where is the vast majority of compensation for these cases basically obtained from? And that's either from a homeowner's policy, renter's policy, or if it's a multi-family apartment complex, the commercial policy on that complex. These policies almost universally have coverage for someone who's been bit by a dog. And the key is that you have to get the policy early on and look at the policy. One of the interesting things that I've seen in policies is oftentimes there's a contractual period of limitation in some of these policies that require us to file suit much earlier than we would otherwise have to file that lawsuit. So it's important that you look at these policies when you get them and determine what that time period is or is not. But these policies oftentimes provide coverage. A lot of times, I mean, to give you an example, even if somebody's at your house taking care of the dog, and if the dog ends up harming somebody, let's say your dog does jump on people. And again, I've had that with a dog that I owned a long time ago. And let's say you have a babysitter that's over at the house and lets the dog outside, and the dog jumps on somebody. If the babysitter has a homeowner's policy, that policy could also come into play to provide coverage if the harms are serious enough, and if the harms aren't covered by the homeowner's policy for the person that owned the dog. So there's a lot of different places that need to be looked at in order to determine if there is coverage there. One of the interesting things that we often look at too in my office, and if we represent you also, we will do that, is what I call the statutory obligations the law that applies to landlords and sets forth the rules that they're required to follow in our society. And there's actually a Ohio Revised Code 532104, which I've just pulled up. And that revised code specifically states that a landlord who's party to a rental agreement should do all the following. They need to comply with the requirements of the applicable building, housing, health, and safety codes that materially affect health and safety. They need to do all repairs and do whatever is reasonably necessary to put and keep the premises in a fit and habitable condition. And they need to keep the common areas of the premises in a safe and sanitary condition. So a lot of times what I will see, and by the way, these not only apply to the person that's on the lease, these requirements also apply to your guests. And there's some case law on that says that your guests are provided, are essentially provided with these same protections that the landlord is required to provide to the paying tenants. So if you're hurt in a multi-family apartment complex in the common area by a dog that's jumped up on you, while the landlord by law is required to maintain and control the common area, if they've allowed that dog either explicitly, expressly, or just tacitly over time, knew there was a dog that one of the tenants had and allowed that dog to live there and didn't do anything about it, if that dog harms somebody, then the landlord is also more likely than not liable, or at least potentially liable, and under Ohio Revised Code 532104. So this is another source of potential compensation. The harbor is somebody that, again, maintains or controls a property and then allows the dog to be there. So if I am a landlord with a small residential property, a lot of times I don't really control, if it's like a single family home, that house. I'm renting out the house, but I really don't have the right to say who can come or cannot come to that house. I'm renting out the house and people come and go. Now, if I am the landlord of a multi-family unit apartment complex, then I control the common area. I basically say who can be there, who can't be there, who can park there, who can't park there. If I allow dogs to be present in that common area, and one of those dogs harms somebody under not only the law set forth here, but also the dog bite statute, there's very likely some liability there. So you need to look at all these, both common law and statutory law, which define rules that we're required to follow as members of the community. We need to look at those and determine whether or not somebody has liability when somebody's been harmed by a dog, when you've been harmed by a dog or your family member's been harmed by a dog. There's a lot more I can tell you about this and a lot more I can share. At this point, I guess I'm going to probably leave that for another video. Just remember, if you have been harmed by a dog, we do take referrals from other lawyers. We also would be happy if you want to just give us a call to discuss your case with you and try to get you justice and restitution for all your harms and your losses. My name is Jim Malek, and I do thank you for watching this today. I'm going to, again, provide some additional videos in the future. By way, again, of background, I was a graduate of the Ohio State University, a zoology major, where I did have some animal behavior background, and I also have owned dogs all my life. So I think, and I've handled these cases, many of these cases, well over 100 in some of these cases, since 1995, and I would be honored to be able to represent you and handle your case or your family member's case. Thank you so much.